Irish-French parliamentary elections are deliciously complicated affairs, and the next 24 hours is absolutely pivotal. Here's what's happening in dozens of constituencies around the country where there are three eligible candidates standing. The left bloc and Macron's centrist bloc are starting to withdraw candidates from the race in order to make those constituencies two-horse races, in order to consolidate opposition to National Rally. If that trend continues, we are potentially in a situation where National Rally cannot achieve a majority. Cue potential parliamentary paralysis.
8 p.m. yesterday, Marine Le Pen's constituency. The exit poll's headline, 1 in 3 of French voters went with National Rally. She spent years demonising the party, distancing it from its racist heritage of which her father was custodian. Last night, mission almost accomplished for the exorcist-in-chief.
La démocratie a parlé.
Democracy has spoken. The French people have placed National Rally and its allies on top and practically erased President Macron's bloc.
At the same time in Paris, Le Pen's protégé, the 28-year-old party leader, Jordan Bardella. The party performed as well as, but not better than expected, and he's ruled out being Prime Minister without the majority.
J'entends être le Premier ministre du quotidien.
I intend to be the Prime Minister for everyday life, the one who will prioritise the cost of living, the restoration of law and order and security throughout the country, and of course, the resumption of controls on our migration policy.
Bardella is the face of the party's sanitisation, and it worked. Around 12 million people voted for them yesterday. From his notes to his body language, everything controlled, disciplined, hard to read.
Mr. Bardella, British television here. Who are you really and what do you stand for, sir?
At Place de la République last night, the chant goes up, Bardella and Le Pen, heirs to France's Nazi-era collaboration. The alliance of left-wing parties, the New Popular Front, came second yesterday by share of vote. For their supporters, a National Rally run France, unthinkable.
What kind of country will this be for you if that happens?
Je peux répondre en français?
Oui.
Je pense qu'il y a...
Personally, I'm on the end of racism regularly, little things. I have less chance of getting a job, I get scrutinised more when I'm looking for places to live. There are things that happen to me that don't happen to white people, and I think that's going to get worse, because these things will become normalised and acceptable.
Why do you think 12 million French people voted for the National Rally?
When you have parties that are supposed to be centre to centre-right and that start applying policies of the National Front, then why not voting for the original and not the copy? And I think that a lot of people now feel that voting for the National Front is like voting for any other party.
The leaders of the left-wing parties want their people to vote tactically in the second round next Sunday to block National Rally winning in constituencies.
We'll do everything to stop that from happening, because that can't happen in France. That's not France, that's not our history, that's not our values.
Macron's centrist bloc came third. How many of his candidates decide to bow out now to make way for candidates of the left and thus block National Rally is the big unknown. And so to the messy business of what happens over the next 24 hours.
The first round results left over half the constituencies in France with the possibility of 3 candidates standing in each one. That number is falling all the time, though, as bargaining takes place to turn them into two-horse races, which means the third candidate has to stand aside to either help or hinder someone else. Would it be true to say that the second round is more about who people don't want in power than who they do?
Of course, we have a kind of motto in France. We say, au premier tour, on choisit, au deuxième, on élimine. On the first round, you choose. On the second, you get rid of someone. So I think it is particularly true in this election. And that's interesting to see that the Rassemblement National has been chosen by 12 million people, which is huge. But on the second round, you are going to get rid of someone. The question is, whom?
If the centrist and left-wing blocs manage to dislodge National Rally in enough constituencies, they will still be the biggest party in Parliament, but without a majority. That could spell political deadlock in France. Then the question becomes, who will the French electorate decide to punish for that? And who might ultimately benefit?
Well, we can talk now to Eleanor Carrois, who's a candidate for President Macron's centrist Renaissance Party. Thank you for joining us. Why do you think so many people have rejected you? Why do you think you're losing?
In general, the bloc, you mean, because I'm in a fairly good position.
Yeah, no, not you personally.
I think there is Okay, we're in campaign, so it's important to specify that. No, I think right now there is a real rejection of traditional politics. I've been sitting at the National Assembly for the past 2 years, and it has been quite a circus. I mean, it's been extremely aggressive, disruptive from the extreme right, obviously, and also from the extreme left. And I think French people are just tired of that, and they want to show their disapproval of what is happening, and this is the reason why they end up voting for a party that presents itself as being an alternative party, a party that is outside of the traditional system, but when in fact it isn't, because the Le Pens have been there for decades. So I believe this is one of the reasons.
Do you think you will be able to do the deals across France in enough places?
I think it is extremely important to block that party, the National Rally, not only for what it is, but for what it represents and for the values that it conveys. For instance, I am a dual national. There are hundreds, thousands, millions of dual nationals, dual citizens in France. And what we've seen in this very rapid and fast campaign is that the National Rally doesn't consider us as French, as equal to French that only have one nationality. And I find that extremely striking, and just one example of what it could do if they were to come to power. The other thing is the economy. I mean, clearly they've been around for a long time, but they have no experience, and their economical program is also very complex and unrealistic. It's just exactly as the far left, the extreme left. So I think it is very important that we block those extremist parties in the next hours and days.
But isn't the point of this first round that the centre has been shown to have failed to have the answers? I mean, Keir Starmer here in this country, who is currently on track to be the Prime Minister on Friday, has said, the lesson of this first round is that progressives need to show that only they have the answers to everyday problems of ordinary people. And that is what you have failed to do, isn't it?
I think there are many reasons. We are in the context of a dissolution that comes after the European elections. Traditionally, since 2014, but even before, vote for the European election has been a protest vote generally, not so much for the programs, not so much for what is happening in Europe, not so much for whether we want to stay or not in Europe, but just a protest vote. And I think it is clearly the consequences now are national. So I don't think you can link the two, but right now what we need to tell the French people is this is not over yet. You have the power to make things right, to make our values prevail. And I think even there's a difference between the left wing and the right wing. There is a bloc, a center bloc, that is important, and that needs to exist, because otherwise the ideas are too dangerous for our economy, but also for our fundamental values.
You've spoken a little of what National Rally might mean for France. What do you think National Rally government in France would mean for the European Union?
I think it would be a total disaster, because what we tend to forget is their close links to Russia. I mean, Marine Le Pen's party had their loan, their money from Russian banks, and she has not hid that she was really close to Vladimir Putin. Right now they've adopted a different stance, but this continues to be something that is out there. And they've also had a very, I would say, ambiguous position on several international matters. And when it comes to Europe, they've also also been very ambiguous and very dangerous. For years, they said they were in favor of Frexit, but now they see that it's not a popular idea anymore, and they've changed their mind suddenly. But the truth is, it is a populist, protectionist party that wants France to be isolated from the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. So that's why I would always find them in their ideas.
If you are to keep National Rally out, you're going to have to do a deal with the left right across France. But what would that mean for the Prime Minister? You know, do you think President Macron is prepared to appoint a left-wing Prime Minister instead of a centrist?
It is very hard to tell, and it's hard to tell right now whether it would be someone from the left or someone from the right. It would have to be a moderate, hopefully. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to constitute a bloc, a Republican bloc of people that don't necessarily have exactly the same ideas, but that have a general ideas of what our values should be, of what our economy should be, and of how we should be integrated within Europe and within the world. But this is not a clear, there's no clear answer. And unlike other parliamentary countries, we don't have a tradition of doing these governmental coalitions. We don't have a tradition of having to share power. And I think it's important that we start learning how to do that.
In the first round of the parliamentary election, what's the possible impact of that here in the UK? Well, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, said the lesson was for progressives to show only they have the answers to why people feel disaffected with politics. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, joins us from Westminster. Gary.
Well, it's interesting. Events in France have spawned a whole load of commentaries saying this is some kind of omen of what could happen in Britain if, say, Keir Starmer were to become the Prime Minister. An awful lot of these commentaries are saying, well, that'd be a bit like centrists, like Macron taking power. There could be disappointment further down the line and an upsurge in populism on the right. Interesting counterpoint to that from the other side of the Channel. Former French Europe Minister Clément Beaune saying that he thought Britain looked like it might be turning a page from demagogic nationalism just as France risks diving into it. What does it all mean for Nigel Farage, though, and will he take lessons from what Le Pen has been achieving in France? He's had a love-hate relationship with National Rally Party over the years. It seems to be slightly closer to the hate section of that right now. He said that their economic policies risked trashing the French economy, but he might want to learn from how they've built up support in councils, built up revenue, built up some sort of professional organisation. But the biggest impact in all of this might well be for the next Prime Minister. If it were to be Keir Starmer, if he were to try to get closer to Europe on trade, on maybe a returns policy, on asylum seekers, even if National Rally don't make it into government, their looming presence would make all of that more difficult and would reduce the bandwidth within Europe for people to engage with building a slightly improved relationship with the United Kingdom when they've got a lot of other things on their plate. In the medium term, the next Prime Minister might have to face a National Rally-led France with a president from that party sitting on the UN Security Council, sitting at the high table of NATO, a joint command of the European Union in the G7, making a complicated world even more complicated.
Thanks, Gary. Well, I've been talking about some of those issues with David Contin, a candidate for National Rally, and I asked him about how they would deliver on reducing immigration, and he spoke of their plans to change citizenship rules in France.
The stuff called droit du sol in France, that if you're born on the territory, you become French automatically, and it's not possible today to continue with that. We can't continue also with all the medical help for all aliens, and we have to change that. And we see in different polls in France, the majority of French want to stop with that, and that's why they vote for the Rassemblement National.
Yes, and what about the minority? Many of them are very afraid of what France will become and what will happen to them if you take power.
I want to say to this minority, you said, don't be afraid, because if you are in France, if you respect the law, if you work and if you pay your taxes, nothing could happen to you because you are welcome. Everybody is welcome, but just respect the law, pay your tax, work, and everything is okay.
But if your laws discriminate against the minority and are discriminatory, for example, against Islamic practices in some communities, then it becomes difficult, doesn't it, to obey the law and also keep your faith?
No French people has to say it's difficult to respect the law. If there is a law, you have to respect it. It's simple.
Yeah.
And if the law change, you have to change your behavior, and that's all.
And what about Britain? The likely incoming government in Britain wants to increase the number of immigrants being returned from this country to France. Would you welcome that?
Obviously not, but we know that the relation between the Great Britain and Emmanuel Macron are less and less good from the Brexit. I think all the countries have to defend their position. That is to say, UK want to defend this country and France want to defend his country. But what we will do with these migrants in the sea? Obviously, we can't let them in the sea, and they have to be welcome somewhere. But
just not in France.
And why not in the UK? We have to work with the UK to solve these problems, this immigration problem.
Just finally, can I ask you? I mean, you are described in most of the English-speaking world as the far right. You know, people describe you as populists, as national conservatives. The language is very reminiscent of fascism in Europe. How do you respond to these descriptions of what you are?
Look at me, I'm not fascist. I am not defending fascism position. Is it because I love France that I'm fascist? Is it a question of racism? Is it a question of race? No, I mean, you can love France, you can defend France. Whatever is your color, whatever is your religion, wherever you come from, I have no word to defend, to explain. Yeah.
Are you far right? Is far right the right way to describe you?
If you think that loving France is far right, you can say I'm far right, but it's just a word to put on ID. But I'm not far right, I'm far France.